After being treated like the black sheep, I rose to power and made them regret ignoring me. The first time I saw my Uncle Darren's face actually drain of color, it wasn't at a funeral or a hospital or any of the dramatic places you'd expect. It was in a rented function room that smelled like cheap sparkling wine and someone's oversweet vanilla cake, with fairy lights taped crookedly to the walls and my family packed around folding tables like we were still the same people we'd been 10 years ago. Darren had just finished his speech, half toast, half performance, about family loyalty and how we stick together, and he'd said my name with that familiar little laugh, the one he uses when he wants everyone to know I'm not one of them. Even they showed up, he'd joked, gesturing at me with his glass, like I was a surprise guest star in a sitcom nobody asked to renew. People chuckled. My mom's smile tightened. My cousin Mel's eyes flicked away, embarrassed on my behalf, but not enough to do anything about it. My throat went dry, and I felt heat crawl up my neck the way it always does when I'm being singled out, and I'm expected to take it politely. I was halfway to setting my own glass down when the door at the back of the room opened and a woman in a navy blazer stepped in, scanning the room like she was looking for someone important. She looked directly at me, then at the banner that said "Congrats, Darren and Tash," and for a split second her expression was pure confusion, like she'd walked into the wrong life. She crossed the room anyway, heels clicking, and stopped right behind Darren. "Hi," she said, voice crisp. "I'm here for Jordan." Darren's laugh caught in his throat. His hand, the one holding the glass, stuttered mid-air like someone had yanked the strings. "For who?" he said too loud. I could feel every head turning toward me, the sudden shift of attention like a spotlight snapping on. I stood up slowly, chairs scraping the floor. My palms were sweating. My heart was punching hard enough that I could feel it in my fingers. "That's me," I said, and my voice sounded calm even though my body was buzzing. The woman smiled, professional and polite. "Great," she said. "Sorry to interrupt. We're ready when you are." And then Darren. This man who has spent years talking about me, like I'm an awkward phase, looked at me with wide, startled eyes, like he'd just realized I existed in the world outside this room. It was a Tuesday night 5 years ago when I decided I wasn't going to keep auditioning for a role my family had already cast me out of. I remember it vividly because it wasn't some dramatic blow-up. It was quiet, which somehow made it worse. I'd come home from work to find a pile of my childhood stuff stacked by my bedroom door in my mom's house. Old textbooks, a half-broken alarm clock, a shoebox of photos, like someone had cleared out a storage unit. Mom was in the kitchen, scrolling on her phone. She didn't look up when I walked in. "Oh," she said, like she just noticed the weather. "I moved your things. Darren's boys need that room for a bit. They're staying over during the week now. It'll only be temporary." I stared at her, waiting for the punchline, waiting for the part where she'd realize how insane it was to tell your adult child they've been displaced like a spare chair. "Where am I supposed to sleep?" I asked. She shrugged. "On the couch. You're never home anyway. You're always out doing whatever it is you do." Darren's boys, my cousins, were in the lounge already, feet on the coffee table, eating chips straight out of the bag like they owned the place. They didn't even look up. Darren himself walked in a minute later and said, "Good timing. You could drive the boys to footy on Saturday, yeah? Since you've got nothing going on." And my mom laughed, like that was normal, like I was the family spare part. I'd been the black sheep long before I understood what the phrase meant. In my family, it wasn't about crime or addiction or anything dramatic. It was simpler, and that's what made it so corrosive. I didn't fit the story they liked telling. My family loves a neat narrative. Darren is the hardworking one. My Aunt Tash is the fun one. My cousin Mel is the pretty one. My mom is the martyr. Everyone has their assigned role, and the roles never change no matter what the actual facts are. I was the difficult one, the overthinker, the person who doesn't appreciate family, the one who thinks they're better. They started saying it when I was a teenager, when I stopped laughing at jokes that weren't funny and started asking questions nobody wanted to answer. Why does Darren get to yell at everyone and still be called passionate, but when I raise my voice I'm out of control? Why do we all have to drop everything to help him, but when I needed a lift to a job interview, it was poor planning? Why does Mom say we're broke while she quietly pays Darren's overdue bills? Questions like that don't make you popular at family dinners. They make you the problem. So I learned early how to survive. Stay useful, stay quiet, stay small. I paid board even when I was broke because I didn't want anyone to call me a freeloader. I bought groceries when Mom sighed loudly about money. I took extra shifts. I did the invisible work, cleaning up after gatherings, driving relatives places, filling in forms, just quickly reading contracts for people who couldn't be bothered. Darren loved that part. Darren loves anything that makes him feel like the center of a universe while someone else does the actual labor. When I finally moved out into a tiny unit with a leaky tap and neighbors who played music at 2 a.m., my family acted like I'd personally betrayed them. Darren said, "So you're too good for us now?" Mom said, "I just don't understand why you want to be alone." The reality was I didn't want to be alone. I just wanted to breathe without someone rearranging my life because it was convenient for them. The last straw wasn't the couch. It was what happened the next morning after I'd slept with my knees tucked up on the sagging cushions while Darren's boys snored in my old room. I woke up early for work, moved quietly, made coffee, tried to exist without being a burden. Darren was at the table, already wearing his work boots like he owned the kitchen. He looked up and said, "Since you're here, I need you to sign something later." I blinked. "Sign what?" He waved his hand. "Just a guarantor thing. The bank's being annoying. It's nothing. You've got good credit because you've got no life." He said it like a joke. He always says the cruelest things like jokes, because if you react, you're sensitive. Mom laughed and said, "Just help your uncle out. It's family." That was the moment something in me went cold and clear. They weren't just using my time anymore. They were eyeing my future like it was another resource on the table. I didn't sign. I didn't argue. I just said, "No," and watched 3 faces in my kitchen turn toward me like I'd sworn in church. Darren scoffed. "Whatever. You're always like this." Mom's eyes got watery. "After everything we've done for you," and I realized that everything she meant was food and shelter, the bare minimum parents are supposed to provide, held over my head like debt. That Tuesday night, I packed my things and left. Not dramatically. I didn't slam doors. I just loaded my car with what I could fit and drove to my unit, then sat on my floor surrounded by boxes and cried until my face hurt, because even when you know you're doing the right thing, it still feels like grief to let go of the version of family you wished you had. I spent the next few years doing something my family didn't understand. I got boring. I got consistent. I worked. I studied part-time. I stopped telling them details because every detail became either ammunition or a joke. I moved from admin to project coordination, then into procurement and contracts. It wasn't glamorous. It was spreadsheets and deadlines and awkward meetings where you had to stay calm while people try to bulldoze you. It was also the first place I'd ever been where being calm and thorough was valued instead of mocked. I learned the language of budgets and compliance. I learned how to read what people weren't saying. I learned that family loyalty and business loyalty are just fancy ways some people try to make you accept bad deals. Meanwhile, Darren kept doing Darren things. He bounced between big ideas and temporary setbacks. He started a renovation company, then expanded too fast, then complained about red tape. He called once every few months with a new crisis. The first time he called after I moved out, I answered out of habit. He didn't ask how I was. He said, "I need a favor." I said, "I can't." He called me selfish and hung up. Mom sent me a paragraph about how I was tearing the family apart. Then, for a while, they ignored me again, and honestly, it was peaceful. The weird thing about being the black sheep is that you start to believe the silence means you don't matter. Like if you're not in the group chat, you don't exist. But my life kept moving anyway. I made friends who knew me outside my family's label. I built routines. I saved money. I sat in meetings where people asked for my opinion and actually waited for the answer. I got promoted. I moved into a better place. I stopped feeling like I needed to justify my existence. Then, last month, my director called me into her office and said, "We've got a sensitive assignment." She slid a folder across the desk. "We're taking over a contract portfolio from a supplier that's been unstable. We need someone to renegotiate terms, assess risk, and either stabilize the relationship or exit cleanly. It's going to require a firm hand." She looked me straight in the eye. You're good under pressure. You don't get rattled. I opened the folder and nearly laughed out loud. Not because it was funny, but because the universe has a sense of timing that feels personal. The supplier's name was there in black print. Darren and Sons Renovations Proprietary Ltd. I stared at it for a long moment. My director said, "Do you know them?" I took a breath and said, "I know of them." "Okay," she said. "Keep it professional. We need this handled fast. There are unpaid invoices, delayed milestones, and compliance issues. We've booked a meeting with the principal on Saturday. He insisted it has to be after hours because he's busy." She raised an eyebrow. "He's bringing his wife. It's apparently a family celebration too." And that's how I ended up in that function room, under fairy lights, being joked about like an old family punching bag, while my family had absolutely no idea that I was the person their entire weekend depended on. To be clear, I didn't walk into that party thinking, this is it. This is my revenge moment. I wasn't even sure I was going to go. Mum's invite came through as a group text. "Saturday night, surprise celebration for Darren and Tash. You should come. Stop being difficult." I stared at it for ages, thumb hovering. Part of me wanted to decline and protect my peace. Part of me was tired of shrinking. In the end, I went because I refused to keep living like I was ashamed of my own name. When the woman in the navy blazer, Lena, our finance partner, asked for me in front of everyone, the room's mood shifted from casual to alert in a way you can almost hear. Darren's wife, Tash, blinked rapidly, her smile freezing. Mum's face pinched like she was trying to compute how I could possibly be important enough to interrupt Darren's spotlight. My cousin Mel's eyes widened, and for once she looked directly at me, fully, like she was seeing me as a whole person. Darren turned slightly, tried to regain control with humor. "Who's this?" he said, chuckling. "Your boss? You finally got a real job?" I felt that old impulse to laugh along, to keep it light, to make it easier for everyone else. My stomach clenched. My hand shook, but my voice came out steady. "Actually," I said, "I'm here for a scheduled meeting." Lena glanced at Darren, then at me, then back at Darren with a professional smile that didn't reach her eyes. "We can step outside if you prefer privacy," she said. Darren's laughter died completely. "Meeting about what?" he asked, and his tone sharpened. I could feel 30 sets of eyes on me. I could hear someone quietly turning down the music. This was the exact kind of moment my family trained me to avoid: attention, conflict, truth in a room full of people who prefer performance. My throat tightened. I took a sip of water to buy myself half a second. "About the contract," I said. "The one you've been trying to extend." Tasha's smile flickered. Mum's mouth parted like she wanted to speak, but didn't know which mask to put on. Darren's voice dropped, forced casual. "We can talk later." "We're talking now," Lena said pleasantly, like she was discussing the weather. "You requested Saturday. After hours." Darren's face flushed. He looked around the room, like he expected someone to save him. Dad wasn't there. Dad never came to Darren's events unless it benefited him. Mum shifted in her seat, eyes darting between Darren and me, panic creeping in. Darren leaned closer, hissed quietly, "You did this on purpose." I stared at him. "You scheduled the meeting," I said just as quietly, "and you invited me here to make jokes." He opened his mouth, then shut it, because the truth is hard to argue with when you don't have control of the narrative. We stepped into the hallway outside the function room. The air was cooler, and the muffled party noise behind the doors made everything feel surreal, like two realities pressed together. Darren's shoulders were rigid, jaw clenched. Tash stood beside him, arms folded tight. Lena opened her tablet with the calm focus of someone who has never had their identity used as a family prop. "I'll keep this simple," Lena said. "There are outstanding deliverables and unpaid subcontracts flagged under your name. There are also compliance issues with insurance documentation. Under our terms, we can pause work immediately." Darren's eyes flicked to me. He knew. He knew I knew what those words meant. He knew this wasn't a family talk. He could steamroll with guilt. "This is ridiculous," he snapped. "We've been loyal to your company for years." "Our company has been paying you for years," Lena corrected. "Loyalty isn't the metric." Darren scoffed and turned to me like he could shame me into fixing it. "So what? You're going to ruin me? That's your big moment? You get to feel important now. My chest tightened, but I kept my voice even. I'm not ruining you, I said. I'm doing my job. Tash made a sharp sound. Jordan, please, she said, tone suddenly sweet, the way people get when they want something. This is embarrassing. We can handle this as a family. Not like this. I looked at her and felt something shift in me. Anger, yes, but also this deep exhaustion at how quickly they reached for family when it served them. Where was family when I was sleeping on the couch? Where was family when Darren tried to pressure me into being a guarantor? Where was family when Mom let him take over my space and then laughed about my no life? You didn't want to handle things as family when it was me, I said, voice low. You wanted me small. Convenient. Darren's face twisted. Don't start with your drama. Lena glanced between us, sensing the personal undercurrent, but staying professional. We can reschedule if. No, I said immediately, surprising myself with the firmness. We're doing it now. Darren stared at me like he didn't recognize the tone. Good. Let him not recognize it. Let him realize he doesn't get access to the version of me that folds. I turned to Lena and said, we can offer a conditional extension if they provide proof of insurance, a revised timeline, and immediate payment arrangements for outstanding subcontractors. If they can't, we exit. Darren's mouth dropped open slightly. You can't talk about me like I'm, he spluttered. Like your supplier? I said. You are. His face went red. I'm your uncle. You've never treated me like family, I said, and my voice shook just a little now, not from fear but from the rawness of saying it out loud. You've treated me like a tool, like a joke, like someone you can move around. Tasha's eyes widened, offended. That's not true. It is, I said, and I'm done pretending it isn't. There was a moment where Darren looked like he might explode. Then his expression shifted into calculation, because Darren is nothing if not a man who knows when to change tactics. His shoulders dropped slightly. He forced a laugh. Okay, he said. Okay, let's not get emotional. Let's be practical. He leaned in, voice low, almost conspiratorial. You can help us. Your family. You don't want everyone hearing about this, do you? Your mom would be devastated. And there it was. The same old leash. Mom. Family image. Shame. I felt something in me settle, solid. They can hear, I said, and I opened the function room door. The music and chatter hit us like heat. Conversations faltered as people noticed us returning with serious faces. Darren's smile snapped on again, too wide, too brittle. I didn't let him take the stage back. I walked to the front of the room where the cake was set up, where the fairy lights made everything look softer than it was. My mom half stood, eyes wild, shaking her head almost imperceptibly like don't you dare. Darren's hand twitched as if he wanted to grab my arm. He didn't. I didn't shout. I didn't insult. I just spoke clearly with the steady calm my job had trained into me. I'm stepping out early, I said. I was invited tonight as family, and I'm glad I came. But I was also scheduled to meet Darren as part of my work. And I want to say something while everyone's here, because I'm done being the joke. The room went so quiet I could hear someone's glass clink against a plate. My mom whispered my name like a warning. I continued anyway. For years, I've been talked about like I'm the odd one out. Like I'm unreliable or dramatic or too much. Meanwhile, I've been building a life quietly because I didn't want my progress turned into a punchline. Tonight, I got to watch Darren make a joke out of me again. And then I got to watch him panic when he realized I'm not powerless. Darren's face was furious, but he couldn't interrupt without proving my point. I'm not saying this to humiliate anyone, I said, and I meant it. I'm saying it because I'm taking control back. If you want me in your life, you treat me with basic respect. No more jokes at my expense. No more using me as the family spare part. And if you can't do that, that's fine. But you don't get access to me anymore. My voice shook slightly at the end, because even when you're right, standing up to your family feels like stepping off a cliff. For a moment, nobody moved. Then my cousin Mel, quiet, pretty, always careful, put her fork down and said softly, I'm sorry. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't a grand apology. It was just real, and it cracked something open in my chest. Darren shoved his chair back, so hard it scraped. This is unbelievable, he snapped. You've always been jealous. I looked at him. I've never wanted your life, I said. I've wanted you to stop using mine. Mum stood fully then, face tight with fury and fear. You're making a scene, she hissed. I'm telling the truth, I said, and I could feel tears burning behind my eyes, but I refused to let them blur my words. You don't get to call it a scene just because it makes you uncomfortable. Darren laughed, sharp and ugly. So what now? You're going to cut us off? You're going to play boss. I took a breath. No, I said, I'm going to play me. Then I turned to Lena, who had been standing quietly at the side, and said, we can follow up Monday with the terms. Lena nodded once, professional. Yes. I picked up my keys. My hands were shaking again, adrenaline rushing out now that the moment was over. I looked at my mum one last time. Her eyes were glossy, mouth tight, like she was holding back something venomous. You're ungrateful, she whispered the old weapon. I swallowed, throat aching. I'm free, I said quietly, and I walked out. I sat in my car afterward for a long time, hands on the steering wheel, breathing like I'd run a race. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt wrung out, sad, angry, relieved, like I'd finally stopped carrying a weight I didn't realize had been crushing my ribs. The fallout was immediate, of course. Messages, calls, guilt. Darren texted me paragraphs about betrayal and loyalty. Mum sent me a voice note, crying and saying, how could you do this to me? Like I just invented the situation out of spite. My Aunt Tash wrote, we can talk like adults, which made me laugh out loud in my empty car because adults don't try to bully their niece into being a guarantor and then call her dramatic for saying no. But there were other messages too. Mel texted again, longer this time. I didn't realize how bad it was. I should have said something sooner. Bree, one of the younger cousins, sent a single line that took guts. Even my dad, who hadn't been there, called me the next day and said, your mum's upset. I waited for the usual lecture. Instead, he paused and added, quieter, but I heard what you said. You weren't wrong. I'm not going to pretend my family suddenly became healthy. They didn't. Darren still thinks the world owes him softness. Mum still thinks love is control. But something shifted because I stopped protecting their comfort with my silence. Once you say the truth out loud, it's hard for people to keep pretending they didn't hear it. Professionally, Darren's company didn't magically recover. They missed deadlines. They couldn't provide documentation on time. We exited the contract. That decision wasn't revenge, it was policy. But Darren experienced it as personal because everything feels personal when you're used to being catered to. He tried to make it my fault. He told relatives I destroyed him. I didn't argue. I didn't run around defending myself. I just kept living in the facts. The fact that he'd been given conditions. The fact that he couldn't meet them. The fact that he'd spent years treating me like nothing. And now he was furious that nothing had boundaries. A few weeks after the party, Mum tried one last time to haul me back into the old roles. She invited me over to talk. I went because I needed closure more than I needed peace. We sat at her kitchen table, same table where I'd been displaced, same table where Darren tried to get me to sign. Mum didn't apologize. She started with, you embarrassed us. I told the truth, I said. She pressed her lips together. Families don't do that in public. That's the problem, I said, voice tired. You think the truth is the embarrassing part, not what you did. Her eyes flashed. Darren is struggling. So am I said, and my voice cracked on that because I was so tired of being the only one expected to absorb pain quietly. I struggled for years. You didn't care because my struggle didn't disrupt your image. Mum's face softened for half a second, then hardened again. You've changed, she said like it was an insult. I had to, I said, because the old version of me was slowly disappearing. She stared at me a long time. So what now? She asked finally, almost small. And I realized this was the real power I'd risen to. Not money or a title or the ability to make Darren sweat in a function room. Power was being able to answer honestly. Now, I said, I stopped letting you treat me like the family spare part. I stopped showing up just to be laughed at. I stopped rescuing people who would never rescue me. And if you want a relationship with me, it has to be one where I'm not the black sheep. Mum blinked rapidly, like she was trying to swallow words she couldn't control. "That's not how family works," she whispered. "It's how my life works," I said, and I stood up because this time I didn't need her permission to leave. I don't know what my family tells themselves when I'm not in the room. They probably still call me dramatic. They probably still say I think I'm better. But here's the thing. I don't live inside their story anymore. I'm not auditioning for it. I'm building something else, something that doesn't depend on being misunderstood. And if they regret ignoring me now, it's not because I punished them with some grand scheme. It's because they finally had to look at the consequences of treating someone like they don't matter, only to realize that someone was quietly becoming the kind of person who doesn't need their approval to stand tall.